right? Nobody likes to feel awkward. Nobody likes to be in awkward situations. But how many of you have found yourself in an awkward situation a time or two? This is something that's kind of unavoidable in life. You think it's just limited to when you're a kid and when you're going through the awkward phase, right? But it's not. You get to be my age and you still have awkward moments. You can be as cool as me and still have really awkward moments, right? It's just a part of life. We all go through seasons, we go through times, we go through conversations, we go through relationships that are just awkward. And sometimes that awkwardness is just limited to your parents and them asking you very personal questions, right? And you don't want to have those conversations, so you kind of move on. And the last place you want to feel awkward is at church when we have to talk about sex. But it would be irresponsible not to. This is what I've said every year, and this is what I've said earlier in the series, that this is just too important of a topic not to talk about, even if it does get a little bit awkward. When I was in elementary school, there were some things that I really enjoyed, toys that I had that I cherished above other toys. How many of you guys are Lego people? I loved Legos growing up, and I liked the idea of building things. I think I've told you the story before of me building an X-Wing from scratch. It took me days, and it was massive, and it was heavy, and it was my prized possession. Well, once I kind of got bored of Legos, there was this new thing that came out called Bionicles. Do you know what I'm talking about? They came in a little tube, and they're like action figures that you could put together they had instructions like Legos, but they were bendable and moldable, and you could like move them around and do different things with them. It was like Legos meets Transformers, and it was awesome. It was the coolest thing ever. And I had like a collection of them, and then they also came out with like a Bionicle movie, which really wasn't that good, but I enjoyed watching it and at the time, and it was fun. And Bionicles, they had a whole lot of value for me. Like I got cherished memories of playing with those toys. I'd bring them to school in elementary school, and do you guys still have like in the desks in elementary school where you hide stuff in them? Like it gets the last day of school and you clean out your desk, and it's like, this has been here since the first day of school, and I never touched it all year, right? That's what my desk was like in elementary school every year. And so I had Bionicles there. I'd play with them at recess. I would play with them at home. And they still kind of, when I think back on them, I have fond memories of playing with my Bionicle Lego toy majig thingies. And they were a lot of fun. And we all value different things. I bet if you think back to your elementary school age days, some of you, it wasn't that long ago. Some of you who are about to go into high school, that was a little bit longer ago. Think about when you were little, and we all had stuff that we enjoyed. We tend to value things because of what they give back to us. We value things because they give back. For me, it was a fun time to be creative, to put stuff together and play with toys, live in my imagination. They gave value. We tend to value things because of what they give back to us. And maybe for you, it's that new pair of shoes because of how they make you feel more confident or look cool or whatever it is. Or maybe for you, it's a new camera to make YouTube videos and make them look more professional or look nice. Or maybe it's something else. But we all have reasons that we assign value to things in our lives. But when those things stop giving us what we want, then they kind of stop bringing value to us. Like by the time I was in middle school, didn't care about Bionicles anymore. In fact, if I'm honest, I didn't think about Bionicles until like this morning for years. Like I probably hadn't thought about Bionicles since middle school or high school before today. I was like, God, what should I talk about today? What was something I cherished in elementary school? Bionicles. I forgot all about Bionicles. And so now I kind of want to like go back and see if that movie's anywhere, just because. Not that I would enjoy it now, but just so that I could relive my childhood a little bit. Is it still on Netflix? Is that what you said? Maybe I'll have to check it out. Anyway, but when things stop being valuable to us, we stop giving value back to them. I want you guys, when I'm talking to you, are you thinking of something that you liked when you were a kid that was valuable? Tell your neighbor real quick. Turn to your neighbor, what was something that you really valued as a kid that maybe you don't even care about anymore? You have 10 seconds. Go. G.I. Joes. I had G.I. Joes too. So I heard G.I. Joes. What else? What did you girls say? Shopkins? Shopkins? I don't know what that is. Polly Pockets. Okay, I know what that is. Cool. My Little Pony. Rats. I just remember the commercials when I would watch cartoons on Saturday mornings as a kid. And those would be the two girl commercials that would come. My little pony, my little pony. Like, or Bratz. It was always, anyway. So, you get what I'm saying. We have value for things when we're younger, and as we get older, we kind of grow out of those things. We stop assigning value. And when we think about our stuff, or we think about things that we were into when we were younger, like that's natural. It's not a big deal. The problem is we're not always that good at compartmentalizing when it comes to the way we think about life. And so the way that we assign and take away value from objects or things that were valuable to us as kids, sometimes that translates into our relationships, that translates into our friendships, that translates into just the people that we interact with on a daily basis. Maybe you had a friend in elementary school that you were kind of close to as kids, but now you're in middle school and you have different friends. You just hang out with different people. And at some point along the way, your relationship with that person stopped being about just another friend to hang out with and more about, let's see, what could we do if we go to their house? And it becomes more of a, what can I get out of that relationship thing? Because I don't really like that person aside from what they can give to me here. And that's our relationships. We start treating them like the old toys we used to play with in elementary school. And this is really important because what we're going to talk about today is all about the value that God has assigned to us and what that means for how we treat ourselves and one another. And the reality is that the way that we treat people that we're interested in or spending time with really matters. The people that, if you have a crush on somebody or you just find yourself liking that person, you want to be around that person, we tend that a lot of times that starts out really innocent and that starts out good. But if we're not careful, that can really quickly turn into something that we care less about them as a person and more about what they can give to me to give me what I want. Maybe we might be tempted to talk about somebody or to somebody that we're attracted to in a way that is degrading towards them. That can be a real temptation. Or maybe we say things about their bodies that is very impersonal and very objectifying. Maybe we even think about people in ways that just doesn't bring value to them because we're thinking about them in ways that we wouldn't want anybody else to know that we're actually thinking. Or maybe we even ask the person that we're interested in to start sending us pictures or doing things with us physically that maybe they're not comfortable with, but in that moment, you don't really care what they're comfortable with or not comfortable with because what we want is what we want. And pretty soon we start assigning value to people not based on their intrinsic value that God has given them, but based on the value that we feel that they can bring to us and what we want in that moment. And this is why this idea that we're going to talk about today is really important, because I know that you guys deal with this. I know that you deal with it maybe not in your own relationships. If you haven't gotten to the point where you're interested in somebody like that yet, that's fine. My hunch is that maybe most of you have those developed feelings like that towards another person. And I know that you're around people that maybe you've seen degrade the people around them. Maybe if you haven't participated in it yourself, you've heard the jokes, you've seen the texts that other people have sent. You've been around a culture where that is normalized. And so maybe this doesn't apply to you right now in this moment, but it will apply to you in the very near future. Because the way that we treat people matters, and the way that we assign value to them affects the way that we treat them. And when we don't treat others like they have value, we wind up treating them like objects instead of people. And you guys have heard this phrase before, like don't objectify somebody. Have you guys heard that? Like this it's pretty common talk. You don't want people to be objectified in the sense that you're disrespecting them. But in our culture, it's weird because we have a culture that kind of normalizes objectification, normalizes viewing people as an object, and it's pretty normal. And so when we translate that into our own conversations and our own relationships, if we don't have like a God filter that stops that, then we just take on the nature of the world that we're in. So it's really important that we're careful. We look out for this and we start noticing where this takes place. The reality is every one of us wants to be valued. No one wakes up one day and goes, you know what? I hope people just treat me for what they want from me and not as an actual human being, right? We want to be valued. We want people to care about us. We want people to care about the real us and not just what we have to offer. We all want this for ourselves, and so it would be, short-sighted and it would show a lack of self-awareness if we didn't treat other people the same way. We all want to be valued. And we all have value simply because we are made by God. We're made by a God. It tells us back in Genesis that God created us in his own image, in his own likeness. And because of that, all throughout the story of the Bible, which is God's recollection of his history with his people, and that extends to us, as we see in the New Testament, that translates not just from a nation of Israel, but a nation of faith believers in God. So we're all under that umbrella. And we see all throughout that story that God has chosen to give us value, not because of things that we've done, but because of who he has created us to be. And we see all throughout the Bible stories of people who God said were righteous, who were noted for their faith, but who were imperfect people and who made big mistakes. You read the stories of the Bible and not the VeggieTales version, you see that these people were human, just like they made big mistakes I would never dream of making. Yet God said that they were faithful and they were righteous. And you see that, and we have value because of the simple fact that God created us in his image, and he created us with an intrinsic value. Sometimes it's amazing how much we can't understand how much value that we have. Sometimes that in itself is an act of faith, that we have value that is beyond what anybody else that we know has assigned to us. Think about the person that makes you feel the best about yourself. The person that, you can just see them and it brightens your day. The person that just one word of encouragement could change your entire week. That person. The amount of value that they assign to you pales in comparison to the value that God has for you just simply by the fact that you exist. And he calls you son, he calls you daughter. And so about 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was teaching and he was doing his ministry, he was confronted by the religious leaders that often tried to trap him and tried to trip him up. And honestly, they were tired of Jesus taking the spotlight because Jesus was teaching people what it meant to actually be loved by God. And he was saying things that the religious people didn't like because they said, you have to do it this way and you have to love this way and you have to do these things. And they liked being the people of authority that people listened to. But Jesus was saying, actually, no, you have value for a different reason. And you are loved by God. In fact, I forgive you for your sins. And they were like, you can't do that. They didn't like the value that Jesus assigned to people. And one time they were trying to trip him up to discredit him. And they were trying to get him in a place where people could stop having so much faith in him and go back to having faith in them as the religiously elite leaders. And so as they're trying to trip him up, they ask him, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And it was a little bit of a trick question, but this is how Jesus responds. He says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is equally important. In other words, there is no greatest commandment. There's kind of a greatest idea that these two things fall under one. They're kind of, the second is just like it. It's just as important. To love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. Love God, love others. We've talked about this idea before, but not necessarily in this context, because the reality is that we have the intrinsic value that is assigned to us by God simply in that we exist. But also that means that we have a responsibility to treat one another as if we have intrinsic value that is given to us by God. In other words, other people in our lives, people that we're crushing on, people that we have an attraction to, they have value not because we have an attraction to them, but they have a value for other reasons unrelated to you and your desires. And therefore, it's important that you treat them as such. This is extremely important when it comes to sexual integrity. And as we've talked the last few weeks, sexual integrity is choosing to respond to the sexual things that we feel and think and desire in a way that respects ourselves and others and God. This is sexual integrity. And this is what we've been talking about the last few weeks. If you haven't been with us the last couple of weeks, and I encourage you to go back on YouTube, watch them. And if you feel awkward having these conversations, watch them when nobody else is in the room, right? But get the information. Get to the truth of the fact that sexual integrity matters, and not for reasons that our world says. This is what this whole series has been about. And how you treat yourself and how you treat others matters a big deal to God. This matters to God because he says basically the greatest thing that you can do is to first love God, and that will filter how you love yourself and others. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. Many of us, we have accepted the role of only being valued for what we can offer. We've accepted the role for only being valuable for the reasons that people say that we're valuable. So maybe you've not struggled with this stuff before, or maybe you have. Maybe you've sent the picture or done the thing or posted this for Instagram or whatever it is, and you kind of taken part in that culture to get more likes or to receive affection and acclamation from the people around you because of what it seems like they like about you, and that is what you have to offer, maybe physically or through visuals. And maybe you have devalued yourself because you think that is what is worth your respect. Or maybe you're on the other end of that and you have disregarded the value for somebody in an effort to try to get them to do something that you want. And I don't know where you're at. I don't know any of you on an individual level enough to know if you struggle with any of these things yourselves. But I know that human nature is real and temptation is strong. And when we're tempted, we stop thinking about others and we start only really thinking about ourselves and what we want. But God is saying how you treat others really, really matters. Because oftentimes you have to realize you are actually valuable, not by what you do, but because of what God has done for you. And other people are really valuable, not because of what they can do, but because of what God has done for them. And when we start seeing people through the lens of God's image, as image bearers of God and not your sexual desires or your sexual attractions, then we start to treat people like they actually have value beyond those things. And this is an incredibly simple thing to understand, but as you get older, it becomes increasingly difficult to live out in a way that has integrity, in a way that has integrity with the way that you see others and the way you speak to others and the way you speak about others, and the way that you look at others when nobody else knows what you're watching. This is really important because everything that we do when it comes to our sexual desires and attractions, it's not just affecting us. It affects the people around us. The way we see other people affects the way that we treat them, because the way that we assign value to things affects the way that we treat them. We don't treat the toys that we liked in elementary school with the same respect that we did in elementary school because we don't value them anymore. And the same is true with people. So, in order to apply this to our lives, there's a couple questions that I want you to think about and to ask yourself. What would it look like for me to treat this person in a way that honors God? When it comes to feeling temptation, or when it comes to, maybe you already struggle with these things, maybe you are struggling with temptation or whatever it is, what would it look like for me to treat the person that I'm struggling with in my mind in a way that honors God? Maybe instead of joking about them or about their body or anything like that, or being around people that are doing that, you speak up to stop it. You say, hey, that's not cool. Hey, let's move on. Or instead of allowing your mind to wander in directions that you know are inappropriate and unhealthy, you put a stop to that. You start remembering who they are according to God. Remember that they are loved and not used. That people are people of value and they are not objects to please. So ask yourself, what would it look like for me to treat this person in a way that honors God? Number 2, do I believe that I have value to God, others, and myself? And if there's any part of that question that you don't know if you agree with, if you struggle to believe that you have value to God, or if you struggle that you believe that you have value to others, or if you struggle to believe that you yourself are valuable, then maybe that's where you need to start with this, because it's really hard to look at other people with honor and value if you don't even see yourself as somebody worthy of value and honor. Because we tend to treat other people the way that we feel about ourselves, oftentimes. And so think through that question. And if you need help diagnosing that for yourself, or maybe that is something you struggle with any part of that question, then I encourage you to talk to your small group leader about it. Talk to somebody that you trust about this, that is older and wiser than you, that can mentor you along into thinking healthier thoughts about yourself, because this is really, really important. It's important that you can see yourself the way that God sees you. And we don't always get that right. I don't always get that right. I don't always see myself the way that maybe God sees me. But it's really important that we keep asking ourselves this question: do I believe that I have value, not for what I do, but because of who I am by God? Maybe you need to come up with better boundaries. If this is a struggle for you, maybe you need to come up with boundaries in your life. And I'm assuming that the Spirit's moving while I'm talking, and you know what those things are, and I don't have to call them out for what they are. But if there are things that you need to set up maybe some healthier or stronger boundaries for, that is something to consider as well. So remember, how you treat others and yourself really matters to God. All of life is connected. We tend to fall into the trap of compartmentalization. The way that we treat our things, the way that we treat others, the way that we treat ourselves. We tend to compartmentalize those things and say, well, I'm good at this and that, but I'm not good at that. But in reality, they all kind of mesh together. The way that we see ourselves affects the way that we treat others. The way that we see other people as God's creation affects the way that we think about them. And all of life is connected. Balance is key to everything. So as you think about this stuff, as you treat the importance of treating yourself and others with respect in the way that God sees them, try not to compartmentalize. Try not to think, well, I'm good at these 4 things, but I'm really bad at this, but that's okay because I'm really good at these 4 things. That's called justification. And when we compartmentalize that, we're not actually doing ourselves any favors, and we're not actually doing a better job of treating others with respect, because what we're doing is we're trying to excuse one thing because of another thing. We're good at other things. And so I encourage you not to fall into that trap. As you guys get ready to go into small groups, think about this question. What's one way that you can show value to somebody else? What's one way that you can show somebody that they have value? I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then you guys can be dismissed into your small groups.